All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the special Chol Moed edition of Daf Yomi, and great to have the live in-person audience growing. And we are on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We are the third, not the widest line, but the where the lines start to get wide. Third line, we're at Tana Hamalvas Chaver Stam. Last thing we had discussed was we were talking about lending during Shemitah. And so as long as we were talking about lending during Shemitah, we're going to just point one more thing out about Shemitah. Tana. Somebody who lends somebody money. So you can't ask the money back from him for at least 30 days. So Rabbi Bar Chana So Rabbi Bar Chana was sitting before Rav, and he thought, you know what this means? It's honey mili b'milva b'shtar. That's if you are making a contract loan. Once you write it out as shtar. Because writing a contract requires an investment, right? You need to hire a scribe, you need to put some time into it. So nobody would bother to do that if the loan was going to be collected tomorrow. The reason why I do that is because it's going to be 30 days, and so therefore I need to be able to remember it. Aval milva al peh, lo. But this would not be the case if I did an oral loan. If I was just doing an oral loan, I don't have to wait 30 days. Amar le Rav. Rav said back to him, Hachi Amar Chaviv, this was my uncle, Reb Chia was his uncle. So Reb Chia said, Echad amalva b'shtar ve'echad amalva al peh. It does not matter. This is a rule that goes across the board. When you make a loan and you don't specify that it's due next week or any other specific time, you cannot ask for the money back for 30 days. It's a 30-day loan. It does not matter. And we're going to see that the law has nothing to do with logic. It's going to be actually hinted at in the Torah. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports that. Hamalvas Chaveru Stam. Somebody lends money to his friend and does not specify the amount of time. You cannot ask for that money back with less than 30 days. It does not matter whether it's going to be in a document or by orally, right? By mouth. Amar le Shmuel Rav Masna. So Rav Shmuel said to Rav Masna, Lo tesiv akarech ad mefarshatz lei lahashmaisa. So he says, Shmuel was coming in, and he says to Rav Masna, he says, I don't get settled in, don't sit down until the first thing I want you to do, explain this law to me. I don't understand where this comes from. Why is it that 30 days, you got to wait 30 days before you can collect your loan? Minahi milsa de amar rabbanan. Where is this thing that the rabbanan said, that the lending somebody money, you can't collect it for less than 30 days. And we learned that it doesn't matter whether it's going to be a contract loan or it's going to be an oral loan. So Amar Le, so he says, Dichsiv, it comes from a pasuk. Karva shnas hasheva shnas shmita. It says that in the Torah that the 7th year is coming up, the Shemitah year. So mimashma shnemar karva shnas hasheva she shnas shmita. The Torah doesn't have to duplicate this. Why? If you told me already that it's the 7th year, I already know that's Shemitah year, right? The Torah doesn't have to tell me now here that the 7th year is coming and it's the Shemitah year. Elamat talmud lomar shnas hashmita. So what is the extra riboy? What is the extra inclusion of this phrase, the Shnas HaShmita, it's the Shemitah year. Lomar loch, to say to you, Yesh Shemitah Acheres Shehi Kazu, there's going to be a Shemitah year which is just also has the same rules as a Shemitah year. And Ve'ezozu, what is this example of a Shemitah year which is a second type of a Shemitah year? We have a Shemitah year which you're not allowed to collect any debts. And now we have another Shemitah where we're not allowed to collect any debts. What is that? That is, in a circumstance, whenever it is, doesn't even have to be during the Shemitah year, that you loan somebody money and you don't specify how much time. It's going to be 30 days is the minimal amount of time before you ask for the money back. As Mar said, now you say it says a Shemitah year. 30 days is not a year. Well, we do have the statement that we had learned from another time that 30 days in a year is considered a year, right? So once you say something is 30 days into a year, then that's considered a year. So therefore, if the Torah says that there's a Shnas HaSheva, and then there's Shnas HaShmita, so we have both things. We have a Shemitah year, we have a 7th year, and then we have another thing which is a Shemitah year, and the minimum amount of days in a year is 30 days. Therefore, we have this 30-day time period where you're not allowed to collect loans. Right? Sounds like so. Therefore, it's not a logic thing having to do with contracts. Now we're back to the statements Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav. Haposech beis hatzavar b'Shabbos. unrelated halacha, but this is related because we have statements from Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says that somebody who gets a new garment on Shabbos, right, and now he realizes that this new garment has no hole in it for the neck, right? So let's say this is your garment, right, like your tzitzis, right, and you realize, I don't have a hole, so I want to be able to cut a hole in it here, so I can get my head through, right? So you cut that open, huh? Yeah. Buy them in the store; they don't come with the holes ready made. See, nowadays it says whole self, right? Oh, you have it already done. So now he opens up this neck hole on Shabbos. He's chayav v'chatos. He is liable, and he has to bring a korban chatos.
Not just that. Isn't that also a malach on Shabbos?
That's what we're saying. He's a malach on Shabbos. Hence the korban that has to be brought. Now, what's the malacha? Right. The malacha is, says Rashi, says that it is makbeh patish, finishing up something, making something into a usable utensil. The last piece of work that needs to be done on this utensil. Right? So therefore, that is making it fit for use. It wasn't fit for use before. You could not wear it before. But now that you do this, so you've made it fit for use. So Maskif Rav Kahana. So Rav Kahana asks the following question. He says, why is it then that if we have a barrel, right, and it's barrel sealed, why is it we're allowed to remove the lid from a barrel? Right? It's a good question. Why can you remove a lid from a barrel? So
you're not finishing off.
Why?
Because it was already open. It was not sealed. Like it's just
because the barrel was already a barrel with a lid on it, and now it just got close together. Because as that's the thing where it says zeh chabar v'zeh eino chabar. The answer is one is connected and one is not. Right? If you've got a barrel, you've got a barrel. A barrel is an open container. And then they put the contents in, and then they put a seal on it, and then, they put some kind of a sealant, a clay or something around the seal to make sure that it wouldn't leak, right? So that they would do. But it was a barrel before. Now it's a barrel with a lid on it. Same thing, right? But this, before it had the hole on it, wasn't a garment at all. By cutting a hole in it, you made it into a garment. Just a cloth. So now that by cutting a hole in it, you made it into a garment. That's why it's different. Okay, so that's the distinction. This comes into, but we won't have time to discuss, lots of conversations about metal bottle caps versus plastic bottle caps and the construction of how those are made and whether you can open those bottle caps. Lots of people have a custom to be able to put a hole, a practice to put a hole in your metal bottle caps.
Some people just have no problem opening it.
And some people have no problem opening them, so related to this. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. It's Rav Yehuda and Rav. Shloshes lugin mayim shenafel letochan kurtov shel yayin. So we've got a couple of halachos that we need to discuss and also some measurements just to be able to have some context. If I'm making a mikvah, so I need to be able to have a mikvah has to have a volume of 40 sa'ah. This is my picture of my big mikvah. This is the mikvah, and inside it's got lots of water, and it has 40 sa'ah. 40 sa'ah is approximately 300 liters, 293, somewhere between 293, 310 liters, about 300 liters. Okay, that's what goes into my mikvah. Where does that amount come from? That is the amount of water that can fit in a container, which is 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amos. Which is the size of a human being, right? So that basically is how much, if you could imagine 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amos tall, that's the size of a person approximately. If you fill that with water, that's 40 saw. Okay, that's what Mission Mikvahs tells us. So that's 40 saw. This is about 300 liters of water, and that's what's supposed to go into a mikvah. The mikvah has to be rainwater or water or water from a stream, not what we call mayim she'uvim. Mayim she'uvim is water that I gather up into a utensil, and once I've got it into a utensil, that water is not kosher for a mikvah. If I put a bit of water, mayim she'uvim, into this mikvah first, and then I let the rainwater fill it up, the mikvah's puzzle, right? The mikvah, if I put that mayim she'uvim in first, then it's puzzle. If, however, I let the mikvah fill all the way up, and I've got my 40 saw of mikvah water, and then I put more water in afterwards. It doesn't matter how much more water I put in, it's kosher, it's fine.
How do you fill up the mikvah water? Just through pipes, or how do you
with rainwater? So that's when you build a mikvah, so this is the tricky part, right? When you build a mikvah, you have to be able to have the pipes, like gutters or whatever, gather the rainwater into the main mikvah. Now, in modern mikvahs, we like to have clean water, so therefore we don't like to have the rain muddy water that flows in.
We filter it through something.
So what we do is we have the original mikvah fills up. It's called a bore, right? That's the main pit that is 40 sa'ah, and then we connect the actual mikvah to it with a small tube, which connects from one to the other side of the mikvah. And as we said, once you've got a mikvah that's full of 40 saw, you can add as much other water that you fill up as you want, connect the two, and then this becomes a kosher mikvah. Okay, so that's fine. So therefore, what we can do in order to keep nice, clean water in the mikvah is that we can have this construction, this mikvah constructed in such a way that the board, which is the main mikvah water, is kept separate, and then we fill up the mikvah and then connect the two, making the mikvah water to be kosher mikvah water. Okay, so that's how the modern mikvah essentially works in shorthand. The issue that we're going to be dealing with now is, what if I filled up my mikvah and I was just about to get to the top and I decide that I'm going to put in 3 lug of mayim she'uvim. Okay?
It will be kosher.
That will ruin it. So less than 3 lug is okay. But once I get to 3 lug of mayim she'uvim, of drawn water, that's going to ruin my mikvah. 3 lug is about 2 liters. Okay, so out of my 300 liters, I got 298 liters of mikvah water, approximately. That's not exact, but I got 298 mikvah. I got all filled up, and I take 3 liters of mayim she'uvim, 2 liters of mayim she'uvim, and I pour it in. It's going to ruin it. That ruins my mikvah. Okay, that is a halacha midrabanan. Why do I have that halacha midrabanan? The halacha midrabanan comes because I don't want to wind up causing everybody to make the mistake and think that they can put the mayim she'uvim into the beginning of the mikvah when they fill it up. That'll ruin a mikvah. So therefore, I don't want any mayim she'uvim going into this mikvah until I've got 40 saw. Okay, so that's the background that we need for this. Now, here's what happens. Rabbi Yehuda saying, Rav, shloshes lug in mayim shenafel v'tochen kortov shel yayin. I've got my 3 lug of water. Okay. And now, into that 3 lug of water, I spill some wine. So now, what happens when you spill wine into water? It turns red. Okay, so now, is that water or is that wine? So now, Umar Ayan...
It's diluted.
It's diluted. So now, we're going to take a look at this. How do you know whether it's going to be diluted wine, whether we're going to call it wine or whether we call it water? Mar Ayan kamara yayin. Let's say it looks like wine now. Right? Poured some wine into it, and now the wine spreads out, and now it looks reddish like wine. V'nafu lemikvah. Now, that 3 lug falls into the mikvah. Okay? So now I've got, remember, if it was 3 lug of water falling into this mikvah, that would ruin it. Because we're not talking about a full mikvah of 40 saw. We're talking about a mikvah that has 40 saw minus the last 3 lug that we needed. So now, instead of having it filled up all the way, I take the last 3 lug and I fill it up with this wine, water. So now what happens? Lo pasluhu. That does not invalidate the mikvah. This rabbinic enactment to ruin the mikvah with the mayim she'uvim, the last 3 lug of mayim she'uvim, only applies to water. It doesn't apply to other liquids. So if I pour wine into, why? Because the whole problem that we were worried about was mayim she'uvim. People were going to take mayim she'uvim and fill up their mikvah. We're not worried that people are going to use wine to fill up their mikvah. So therefore, they never made the gzera on the wine. They only made the gzera on the water. So therefore, if this 3 lug now looks like wine, then it is wine. And if you pour 3 lug of wine into this mikvah that has almost 40 sa'ah of water in it, that does not ruin the mikvah. That's going to be fine. Okay, that's number 1. Maskif lo Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, well, wait a second though. V'chima bein zel lemeit seva. What's the difference between red water that is red because wine spilled into it and water that's red, let's say, because it has some red dye in it? V'ditznan, we learned in a Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi says, meit seva poslenes hamikvah bishloshes lugin. He says, if I had some water that was red because I have some red dye in it, put some red food coloring into this water, that if I pour that into the mikvah, that does ruin the mikvah. What's the difference? So Amar Le Rava, so Rava says, Hasamayid itzava mikra hachachamra meziga mikri. The whole point is the difference is, what do we call this liquid? According to Yehuda, he told us, and Rev Yehuda, that we call this liquid that I poured a little wine into, diluted wine. Very diluted wine, but diluted wine. That's what we call it. However, when I put a little bit of red food coloring into this water, I call it dyed water. It doesn't become a different thing. It's still dyed water. And the concern that the Rabbanan had was that water would mix, the mayim she'uvim would mix with my mikvah. Just because it's the color red doesn't mean that it's not water, because that's what everybody's calling it. Everybody's calling it water. So therefore, that's going to ruin the mikvah. But when it's diluted wine, well, wine into the mikvah doesn't spoil a mikvah. Therefore, very diluted wine doesn't spoil a mikvah.
Would white wine be a problem?
That's what we're going to see next.
Okay.
Right? We're going to use milk rather than white wine, because maybe they didn't have so much white wine, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're going to use milk, which is going to be a liquid. The point that you're making is, what if I have a liquid that looks like water, right? And therefore doesn't change the color? Is it considered to be? Does the liquid become diluted that liquid, or is it still water? So now,
Why use wine? Why use milk if milk is white?
well, so we're going to milk it white milk. I didn't bring my science experiment. I was thinking I'll bring some milk or whatever. If you pour a little milk into water, it still looks like water, right? It doesn't look.
There's such as cloudy water.
Especially since their water was probably cloudy, right? We're used to water being very, very clear. That probably wasn't the way their water looked for
And their wine was very thick.
Okay, now, Tani Reb Chia. So Reb Chia taught as follows: Horidu as a mikvah. So he says, well, one second. We have Reb Chia. Reb Chia says that he has a brisa that he talks about water that's mayim she'uvim, that a little bit of wine fell into it, which is exactly our case. And he says that they made the mikvah puzzle. Well, that's opposite of what we just said. We said that the wine is not going to ruin the mikvah. So Amarava Lokasha. I'll tell you why it's not a contradiction. Because Rabbi Chia is Ha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Ha Rabbanan. There's an argument between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is going to say, in the Mishnah that we're about to quote, that everything goes by the color. You want to decide whether this is wine or whether it's water or whatever it is, take a look at what color it is. It does not matter how much volume the item is, it's the color that matters. And so therefore, to take a look at whether this is wine or whether this is water, we take a look at this is wine. Why? Because the color is red. It doesn't matter that it had 3 lug of water before. Now we put a little wine in. Now they put a little wine in. The whole thing becomes wine because that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says you go like the color.
So you'd be okay with dyed water?
No, not dyed water. That I think he still agrees. Dyed water is still water. That we said that we addressed first with that other separate brisa.
Right.
But he says the wine becomes, because water is still going to stay water. But this means once the color changes to red, it becomes wine. That's what he's saying. So now it becomes wine. Whereas the other opinion, the other brisa that says the mikvah is puzzle says, I'll tell you why the mikvah is puzzle. There were 3 lug of water. If you didn't put any wine into it at all, you just dumped that 3 lug of water in, that would ruin the mikvah. So now what'd you do? You dumped a little wine in it. It's still 3 lug of water. And you have a little wine in it, but the 3 lug of water would have ruined your mikvah. So therefore your 3 lug of water is no good. So this is the argument between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri or the Rabbanan about whether we focus on the look of the how the liquid looks, or the amount, the measurement, the 3 lug that is important, which is the most important part. Ditnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, Shloshus lugin mayin. If I've got 3 lug of wine, now this is an important piece right here that is going to be disputed whether you include it or you don't. Loiterman Aleph. Chaser Kortov. Let's say I've got 3 lug of water, and a little drop, Kortov is a very small measurement, is missing from the water. It's not fully 3 lug. Again, 3 lug is the minimum amount to ruin the mikvah. If I have less than 3 lug, it doesn't ruin the mikvah. So if I poured this water into the mikvah right now, it wouldn't ruin it. It wouldn't fill up to my 40 saw. So I put a little wine in it. So shenafal letochan kortov yayin. Now he's got 3 lug of a mixture of wine and water, but it was never water in the first place. Didn't have 3 lug of water in the first place. Umarei and kamari yayin, and now it looks like wine. V'naflu lemikvah, and it falls into the mikvah. Lo paslu. That is not puzzle. Why? Because it's wine, and also because it doesn't have 3 lug of water in it. V'chein, similarly, gimel lugin mayim. Chasar kortov. Let's say I have 3 lug of water again, minus a little drop. Shenafal letochan kortov cholov. And now a little bit of milk falls into it. Marain kamar mayim, but it looks like water. Okay, so now v'nafal mikvah, that falls into the water, into the mikvah. Lo pasluhu. That is not puzzle. Again, why? Because this is the shita of the Rabbanan. It cannot ruin the mikvah until you have 3 lug of water. In the 2 first cases, we had not enough water. You had some water, and then you added another liquid. It doesn't matter whether that liquid was water, was wine, or whether that liquid was milk. You didn't have 3 lug, does not ruin your mikvah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri disagrees. He says, Hakol holech achar hamara. He says, everything goes by the way it looks. He says, what do you got here? If I've got some wine, right? So then the wine, he says, he is arguing on 2 points here, right? Number one, if I've got wine, if it looks like wine, if the water looks like wine, it is wine. So even if I had 3 lug before, and I poured some wine into it, it becomes wine. Second thing that he's pointing out is, if I had less than 3 lug of water, and I dump a little milk into it, it looks like 3 lug of water. Therefore, it is 3 lug of water. So therefore, his point is he's going to argue on 2 points. The Tanna Kama, the first opinion, says 3 lug of water with a little wine in it is going to ruin your mikvah. To which Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, no, it's not, because 3 lug of water plus a little wine makes it wine. Then the Tanna Kama said, if I have 3 lug minus a little bit and I put some milk into that, that's not going to ruin your mikvah because I didn't have 3 lug of water. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, sure it is. Once I put a little milk in it, it just looks like 3 lug of water. Therefore, it is 3 lug of water, and therefore it does ruin your mikvah. Okay? So that's his point, right?
Why are they more worried about it looking like, it's weird, because it's a mikvah. Why would they be okay with it looking like wine? It's like, you don't want to go into a mikvah of wine. That's not kosher.
Well, remember, once you dump it into 40 saw of water, you're not going to see anything, right?
Right. Well, the dye, I guess, if it's 3 liters would
I mean, if you put 3 liter of dye into it, right? Maybe that, yeah. So, therefore, this point of contention in these 2 brises can be explained simply by saying one was the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, whether this wine that had 3 lug of water in it, plus a little bit of wine, whether that validates or invalidates, whether that ruins or doesn't ruin the mikvah, that is solely dependent on whether you're holding like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri or the Rabbanan. If you're holding like the Rabbanan, it's 3 lug of water. Hence, it's no good, because you go by the volume of water that you had. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he says, no, once you put a little bit of wine in it, it becomes wine. It doesn't matter if you had 3 lug, and therefore it's valid. So, Hami boy lo Rav Papa. He says that, actually, this whole explanation thing, this was all a question to Rav Papa, right? We had a great answer and we solved it, but Rav Papa looked at it as a question. Rav Papa asked the following question. Rav Tani Chosav Kurtov Bereisha, when we learned this Mishnah and Rav had his opinion, did he have the words minus a kurtov in the beginning part of the Mishnah? Remember I said those are very important words, the very first words on the page. Is the case that we're dealing with in this brisa here, is that a case where we had where the Rabbanan were talking about, well, I had the water and had a little drop missing, and therefore if I add a little bit of extra liquid, whether that's important, whether that changes the status or that doesn't change the status? The reason why it makes a difference is because he says like this, Aval shlosha lugin, let's say, if you were reading the Mishnah the way we read it, so then we would have read it that you'd have 3 lug minus a little bit, and that would be the halacha that we said, whether it's wine or water, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri comes along and says that the milk makes it water. Aval shlosha lugin, but what would happen if there were 3 lug of water total, right? Tanna Kama pasli. That's how we explained it. According to the Tanna Kama, you know why the wine doesn't ruin the mikvah? Is because you had less than 3 lug. It didn't matter if there was milk, it didn't matter if there was wine, you had less than 3 lug of water, therefore it didn't ruin the mikvah. However, if you had 3 lug of water, even if you added wine to it, it would still ruin the mikvah. V'asar Rabbi Yochanan, and then Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri comes along, the Meimar, to say, Hakol holech achar mara. No, it goes after the look. The Rav Omer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and Rav, who says that the wine, the colored water that falls into the mikvah doesn't invalidate the mikvah, he's holding like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because he says it's 3 lug of water plus a little wine, and that's not valid. Whereas that is valid, whereas because it's wine, whereas the Tanna Kama holds once you have 3 lug of water, it's no good. Oh, Dilma, or maybe that's not the case. Maybe you don't read the text that way. Rav lo tani chaser kurtov bereisha. That phrase chaser kurtov doesn't exist in this brisa, and so therefore, what this brisa says is that even if you had 3 lug of water, even the Rabbanan would agree that would not ruin the mikvah. Why? Because the Rabbanan go by both standards. Number one, I need it to be a liquid of 3 lug of water, plus it can't look like wine either. So therefore, if I have 3 lug of water and I add a little milk to it, that's going to ruin your mikvah. But if I have 3 lug of water and I add a little wine to it, everyone agrees that that's wine and that's okay, which means for Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, ki polig aseifa. What's Rabbi Yochanan arguing about? He's arguing about the second part to the polig, about the milk, because the Rabbanan said that if I had a little drop of, if I add a little bit of milk, right? What if I add a little bit of milk to this? So then that is going to, according to the Rabbanan, is going to say that that's not going to be enough water. And according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he says it is water because you've got a shear now because you've added a little milk. So V'Rav Damar Kedivrei Akol, and now Rav is going to hold like everybody because everybody holds that we're going to take a look at the color. If the color changes, then everybody says it's not water anymore. So how are we going to? So Rav Papa. So the answer is Rav Papa mi boile. So the answer is Rav Papa was asking this as a question. L'Rava pshitale, but Rava he thought it was very clear that the words chaser kortov was in the brisa. Therefore, he explained the brisas that way. Okay, Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says lo shmiya li hoshmaisa. So he says, I have a problem here. Says Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef's was a Talmud of Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yosef said, I don't remember Rav Yehuda saying any of this. So I'm a little bit skeptical of the fact that this teaching ever existed, because I would remember if my Rebbe had said it. The only thing is that Rav Yosef famously got sick at one point and forgot all of his learning. So therefore, there were many things that he had learned, but he could not remember. And we have many Gemaras like this, where Abaye, who was Rav Yosef's student, reminds Rav Yosef of things that he had taught them before. So Amar le Abaye says, At amart lo, you actually told us this teaching. And At amart lo nielon, you had taught us this. Vahachi amart, and this is how you taught it nielon to us. De Rav lo toni chaser kortov bereisha, that Rav does not in fact have the words chaser kortov at the beginning. For Rabbi Yochanan aseifa polig, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's point is only to argue about the milk in the water, whether that completes the shear in order to make it 3 lug of water, where Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says since it's not doesn't change the look of it, it does complete the shear and it's going to invalidate the mikvah, and the Rabbanan say it doesn't. For Rav de Amar Kedivrei Akol, and Rav is going according to everybody that a little bit of wine would ruin the whole thing. So therefore, when Rav makes his statement, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, then that the wine pours into the 3 lug of water, that it doesn't invalidate the mikvah. That's according to everybody. That's how Rav Yosef had taught it to everybody. Okay, good. So that's the end of that section. But a little bit more on mikvahs, since it's already there. From Rav Yehuda Amarav. Rav Yehuda said another thing in the name of Rav. Chavis malea mayim. Let's say I've got a barrel full of water. Okay, I've got a barrel full of water. Shenafla liyam hagadol, and it falls into the Yam Hagadol. I think it's the Kinneret. Is that where that is? Right? The Yam Hagadol is the Kinneret.
Not the Mediterranean?
I don't think that's the Mediterranean. No. Yep. Okay. So where is my girl? Right. It's a you say the Mediterranean?
I don't.
You don't. He says Mediterranean. Okay. I was hoping it was the Kinneret, because the Kinneret it doesn't move around. I'm like it would apply equally to the Kinneret, right? The Yam Hagadol. Okay. So. Hatovel sham, if you go to the mikveh there, okay, you drop the barrel of water in, it spills into the water there. Now you jump in, you say, I want to go to the mikveh. So the guy jumps in, goes to the mikveh right there. Lo tvila. That tvila does not work. Didn't count. Why? Because chashinan l'shosh lugin shelo yehu b'makom echad. We're worried that since you just poured a barrel of mayim shuvim water into this spot, you probably still have some of the mayim shuvim still in that spot in the water.
But the collective of the Kinneret is way more than 40 saw.
But it didn't spread out yet.
So would that apply if I'm standing under where I pour water when I'm in a mikveh? If I'm pouring.
Yeah, maybe exactly where you would be if it didn't float around. Yeah, you got to mix it up first, right, before you jump in. That's the point. Now, v'dafka liyam hagadol. This has to be. That's why I was saying it may be the Kinneret or whatever, right? Has to be the Yam Hagadol. Yeah, but he says the Mediterranean. Okay. I don't. Maybe the Mediterranean doesn't have a strong current either, because dekaya v'kaima, because the water is very still. That's the important thing. The water is very still, therefore it doesn't float around.
I think the inference is that any place that's very still.
Right. Anytime the water is very still. Aval nara be'alma. But if you have a river, right? If you're going to dunk in a river water, then the river's flowing. So then this would not be an issue, because as soon as you dump the water in, it flows down. Then it's gone. Right. Tanya Nami Yachiv, a brisa that supports this also. Chavis Malaya Yayin. Let's say I've got a barrel of wine. Shenafel Yamagodol, it falls into the Yamagodol. Hatovel Shamlo also lo tvila. If you dunk there, the tvila does not count. Chashin l'shlo shalugin sheuvin shaluya b'mokum echad. We're worried that you're going to wind up with three things of drawn water, but it's the wine, right? We're worried that you're dunking in wine, not in the mikvah. V'chein kikar shel truma shenafel sham. Also, let's say I have a loaf of truma, okay, and it falls into that location, so it's tameh. So it becomes tameh. Now, here's what happened. I was tameh, so I dunked into the mikvah. If it was a valid mikvah, I would become tahor. If my loaf of bread that was truma fell into it, it wouldn't have a problem because I became tahor. The mikvah water is tahor, no problems. However, if I jumped into a bathtub and it's not a mikvah water, so then when I'm tameh, I make the water tameh. Now I've got tameh water. I drop my loaf of truma into my tameh water. My loaf of truma now becomes tameh. So therefore, not only this person, not only is he dunked in the mikvah, is he still tameh, but the loaf that he drops into the water afterwards also becomes tameh, because we're worried that the loaf touched some of the water that wasn't mikvah water and now made the loaf tameh.
Who's going to eat the bread?
It's a good question. I wasn't sure exactly right. I guess they were really, if you're really hungry, Pesach was going on a while and the bagel looked really good. I don't know. That's a good question. So, my v'chein. So, 1 second. What is the point of this extra second? I mean, it's logical, right? But the Mishnah the Bryce doesn't just throw extra things at us that are just logical. There's an extra thing that is teaching us here. What is the point here? So, Ma'odetema, what would you have thought? We would have thought that the whole issue here is a suffix, a doubt. Meaning, I'm pouring water into this location. Do I know that the water that I then jump into is bad mikvah? I don't know. So why am I still tameh when I jump in and I get out? The answer is because I don't know. I was tameh. I can't prove that the mikvah was good. So I get out, you stay tameh. However, the loaf of bread was tahor. I drop it into the water. Do I know whether it touched something that was tameh or not? No. So maybe it stays tahor. It stays the way it was.
We'd have to Rabbanim look into it to make sure.
Well, the Rabbanim couldn't tell you what it was because they wouldn't be able to look and see what the water was, right? There's no way of taking a water sample and knowing whether this was water that mixed or wasn't the water that mixed. You're just in doubt, right? So when in doubt, you go by chazaka. You go by whatever it was. Everything stays the way it was. So therefore, hosam oki gavra achazkei. So the reason why the person dunked into the water is still tameh is because he stays the way he was. He was tameh before, and now he stays that way. Hacha truma chazaka. So I might also think that the truma stays tahor because I leave it as the chazaka kamash malan. Therefore, we say no, it isn't a doubt. We're actually really serious about this. When the guy jumps in, that water is tameh, and we are serious. It is tameh water. So if you drop a loaf of bread in there that was tahor, it becomes tameh. And therefore, it's not a suffix issue. That's the point that the Bryce is trying to make
Is it
to us.
lachumra? Is it suffix deraisa lachumra?
It's not you would
Because
say a suffix deoraisa because it is a deoraisa issue of eating tamei truma. Is there a suffix deoraisa lechumra? No, because we would say that it's a chazaka. Correct. It's a chazaka is going to overrule the suffix here, right? The suffix would be resolved by the chazaka, but here we're saying is there's no suffix. There's nothing to be resolved. This really is tamei. It's the same thing as if I would take tamei water and sprinkle it on the loaf of bread. It is tamei. So therefore, that's the way we look at it. Now, this is the sugya that I was waiting for because Brian was hitting me with on Yontif this question, and I said I'm going to wait till today, and he'll be happy with me. Says the Mishnah, Me'idin anu b'ish ploni shechayev lechaveru masayim zuz. Okay, somebody's testifying about his friend that he's owes him 200 zuz. V'nimtzu zomim, turns out that the witnesses are zomimim. Lokin u'mishalmin, so you give them lashes and they have to pay. Right? Two different averos. Why? Shelo Hashem hamavin li Makkos mevin li tashlumin. Because why do you have to pay? Because the pasuk says kasher zomam la'asos la'achiv, the way that you schemed, right? So you have to pay the 200 zuz. And the pasuk says, "Lo sa'neh bereyecha et sheker." You cannot bear false witness. A lo sa'seh, for which you get lashes. So therefore, two different averos, you get both punishments. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. V'chachamim omrim, the Chachamim says, Kol ha'mishalim ein loka, you cannot get two punishments for the same crime for the same thing. Even if there's two losases, you can't get two. So therefore, kamei b'derabmina, you're going to get only one. And we learn in Maseches Bava Kama that it's always money. Mammon and Makkos, we always give mammon. Okay, so another case, we testify about a person shuchayev malkus arboim that he did an avera, and the result of the year he's supposed to get a punishment of 40 lashes. V'nimtzu zomamim. Turns out the witnesses are zomim. Lokin shmonim. We're going to give him 80 lashes. Mishum lo sana bereyecha it sheker. First, because you violated the prohibition of being a false witness. Umishum vasisim lo kasher zomam. And second of all, because you have to give him the kasher zomam. 80 lashes. Divrei Remeir says. V'chamer omer, the chum say, in lokin ela arbaim. It's only 40. We don't count it as two. Okay, says the Gemara. Dalet Amabeis. Bish lama l'Rabbanan. Fine, according to the Rabbanan. I understand why you're only going to get one punishment, because here's kamle b'derabmine. Kedei risha soksiv, the pasuk says that you punish him according to his wickedness, and it says wickedness is in the singular. Risha soksiv. Mishum risha achas atamechayvo v'yatamechayvo mishum shtei rishios. Xeris akasiv is that when a person does one action, and he violates two averos with that one action, he can only get one punishment. That's how the pasuk is. Ella Rabbi Meir, but according to Rabbi Meir, my taima. Where does Rabbi Meir get the idea that you can get two punishments for one action? Samar Ula says, Gamari Motzi Shemra. He says, I know this from this Avera that we had discussed. Motzi Shemra. Somebody is going to lie about his wife and say that she wasn't a Basula when he got married. So then we know that there's two punishments there in the Torah, because the Torah says that he's going to have to pay 50 shkalim and he's going to have to get Malkus. So therefore he gets two punishments for this committing the one crime of Motzi Shemra. Yeah, but ma Motzi Shemra, just like Motzi Shemra, Loke u'mishalim, you get Malkus and you have to pay Afkol Loke u'mishalim. So too, that's general practice now. We call that a mematzinu, right? Now, a binyanav. We can say, now that we see that such a concept exists, that you could do one thing wrong and get lashes and have to pay, so that's the same thing. Yeah, but ma Motzi Shemra shekain knas. So he says, yeah, but now we have to show how these two things are different. Motzi Shemra is a knas. How do we know Motzi Shemra is a knas? It's a fine, it's a penalty. Why? Because he didn't actually cause the woman any loss. It's not nezikin, it's not a damage, right? He is going to be fined for his terrible behavior. But it's not that he actually caused damage that he's repaying for her. So therefore, how can you compare that to Edom Zomimim, where it should be, where we're going to say that it's not a knas.
Rabbi
right?
Akiva says it is a knas.
Oh, so Savar, look, Rabbi Akiva, Amar Edom Zomim knasahu. He must hold like Rabbi Akiva, who says that Edom Zomim is a knas. Okay, so that means Rabbi Meir holds like Rabbi Akiva. I just wanted to point out that this, we always, like when we learn this Gemara in many schools, right? It's a done deal that Edom Zomim is a knas. Why? Because that makes logical sense, because nobody ever lost any money, right? But just the point is that it's clear from here that that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. There is the other side that says it's not a knas. And the Mefarshim and the Rishonim struggle with how Edom Zomim is not a knas, considering you never cause the other people to actually pay anything. So, I'm going to get it. There's something I could talk about in Shavuos night.
But it's interesting. Motzi Shemra is considered a kanas. You're getting a kanas.
Motzi Shemra is a kanas.
So why not lashon? Why can't this be considered lashon hara? Why is it like you're saying something that's not true? All right, it is Motzi Shemra. Sorry, it is Motzi Shemra. Kasher Zamam is Motzi Shemra.
Motzi Shemra is specifically in this context, this avera of speaking about a basula that she's not a basula.
Right,
that you're about your wife. That's the specific case. Otherwise, Motzi Shemra is not talking about the general avera of speaking badly about another person.
No, making up badly.
But remember that when we say lashon hara is not itself an avera as much as it is a term used for a group of averos that happen when somebody speaks falsely about another person.
But why can't this be a binyanav on Motzi Shemra? Because it's more Motzi Shemra, right?
So now that's what Rav Meir says. Right. Rav Meir says that since Motzi Shemra you get two punishments, so too always with Edom Zomim you can get two punishments. So that's his rule.
Why isn't defaming your wife considered a monetary issue also? Because if you defame your wife, she's worthless.
Because you're staying married. She has to be worried. They're still married.
Why do it?
She didn't lose her ksuba.
Yeah,
Right. So Ika demasni lahad deula aha. So some taught this teaching of ula on the following. Titania. We learn in a brisa. Lo sosirim mimenu ad boker. Right. Pasuk says about a korban that the korban cannot be left over until the morning. Va'nosir mimenu ad boker. You have to eat it at night, and if you leave it till the morning, what do you have to do? You have to burn it. So now, the pasuk is telling us you have a losase, right? Don't leave it over to the morning. And then we have a positive commandment afterwards. Burn it. Okay? So lomar. So that's to tell you shein lokin alav. That's to tell you that when you have such a circumstance, there's no Makkos for that avera. The losase, which has a positive commandment to afterwards to fix it, you don't get Makkos, just do the positive thing afterwards, right? You don't get Makkos because if you let's say you don't eat it and you don't burn it. So what happened? So you didn't eat it, right? So that is a losase. Okay, but I can't get Makkos for that because I can always fix it by burning it. Well, you didn't burn it. Well, then what'd you do? You just didn't do an asay. Not doing an asay doesn't give you Makkos, right? If I don't put on my tefillin, so I don't get Makkos for that, right? That's an asay. So therefore, when you have a positive commandment after a negative commandment, there's no lashes, right? Torah says, don't steal, and if you steal, return it. So you don't get lashes for stealing because you can always fix it by returning it. Okay.
Where does the Torah just say steal? If you still return it, when the commandment says do not steal.
I have to look up which pasuk it is, but the pasuk definitely says, right? If you steal it, then you have to return it. Sometimes you pay 4 or 5 times for an ox, for a sheep, right? So the pasuk definitely tells you to return it. Now here it says, if you leave it over, burn it in the morning. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva says, Lo min Hashem huzeh. That's not the reason why you don't get lashes for leaving your korban over to the morning. The reason is because this is a prohibition that there's no action to it. Meaning, what was the thing you're not supposed to do? Don't leave it over till morning. What's the action of leaving something over to morning? There's no action there. It's not doing something, right? It's inaction, which is the negative is don't do nothing, right? Eat it, right? That's what you're supposed to do. But the mitzvah doesn't say eat it. The mitzvah is don't leave it. So therefore, by inacting, you are violating. That's why you don't get Makkos. V'lav shein bo ma'aseh ein lokan alav. And all of the prohibitions that you don't have an action, that's where you don't get lashes. Now, mikal Rabbi Yehuda suffer lav shein bo ma'aseh lokan alav. That means that Rabbi Yehuda says that that's not the reason, right? Therefore, he holds that generally speaking, if there's no action, you still get lashes. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Minole, where does Rabbi Yehuda know that from? Samar Ula says, Gemar mi Motzi Shemra. He learns it from Motzi Shemra. Ma Motzi Shemra lav shem bo ma'aseh lokan alav, because Motzi Shemra, there's no action. Speech is not an action, right? An action, speech is not considered halachically an action. So if this person is slandering somebody, that's not going to be an action. And yet, the Torah says that you get lashes for that. So af kol lav shein bo ma'aseh lokan alav. Therefore, he says that every inaction, which is a negative commandment, you also get lashes for.
Then Edom Zomim, it's speaking.
That's right.
So they shouldn't get
According to Rabbi Yehuda, he should get lashes for the crime of lo saneh. That's where we're headed, right? You're ahead of us again, right? Right. The issue that's coming up is, according to what Rabbi Yehuda is saying, is that speech is in itself a crime you should get punished for.
Right. I mean that.
And the Rabbi and Rabbi Akiva is going to say the punishment of lo saneh, the crime of don't testify falsely, doesn't carry lashes as a consequence because it's not an action.
But we see it with Bas Cohen, and we see that there's Arba. There's 40 lashes. Like in the Mishnah, you see it.
We see that there are cases of 40 lashes, not cases of 40 lashes where there's no action. Now, Edom Zomimim is a different story. Edom Zomimim, the Torah specifically says, right? V'haya im bin hakos harasha. We need a special pasuk to tell us that you got lashes for that case, because it's an exception to the rule, not the rule. Okay? So which we're going to say maybe 2 cases means it's not an exception, maybe it is a rule. So we're going to see that in a second. Yeah, but how can you learn from Motzi Shemra? Motzi Shemra is a very unusual avera. Motzi Shemra is unusual because you get lashes and you have to pay, which is not the case any other time. Ella, so rather, Amar Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish says, Gemar mi Edom Zomimim. You know where you're going to learn that you get lashes not for speech? From Edom Zomimim, right? It says Edom Zomim that if you just speak, we said that you get 40 lashes if you testify falsely about somebody. So ma Edom Zomim lav shem bo ma'aseh lokan alav, just like Edom Zomim is a prohibition where there's no action, like Brian is saying that you're just speaking, af kol av shiva ma'aseh lo kenolav. So to any prohibition where there's no action, you should get Makkos. Yeah, but Ma'ale Edom Zomim Shekain Ein Tzrichen Hasra. He says, yeah, but Edom Zomim has its own unique Avera, in that all other Averas in the Torah, in order to get lashes, I need 2 witnesses and I need to get warned. Edom Zomim do not get warned. Remember, we think when they walk into court, they're telling the truth. So what's the warning you can give them? We had this discussion in Sanhedrin. You can't say to them, hey, if what you're about to say is false, then we'll punish you, because that's what we call a hasra, which is a doubtful hasra suffix, a doubtful hasra, which doesn't work. So therefore, it comes out that there's no warning given to witnesses, so therefore it's a unique avera. You can punish them with lashes despite the fact that there were no witnesses warning them in advance. Okay, well, Motzi Shem Richiach. Now we're going to say, well, there's actually now 2 different times that the Torah says that you don't commit an action, you don't do an action, and you still get Malkus. So the Torah is going to say, the Gemara is going to say, whatever you think is unique about one isn't the case in the other, and whatever is unique in the second isn't in the case in the first. So we have a situation in which whatever's causing the Malkus cannot be that which is individual about each thing, because it doesn't exist by the other case, right? If I'm going to say the reason why, right, that I'm driving my car and I got a speeding ticket, right? So I'm going to say the reason I got a speeding ticket is because it was a sports car. Yeah, but then I was driving my Toyota Camry and I got a speeding ticket. Well, no, the reason you got a speeding ticket is because it was red, because your Toyota Camry was red. And the police always pull over. Yeah, but my sports car was blue. So it can't be because it was red, and it can't be because it was a sports car. It must be because you were driving too fast, right? It's not going to be.
That would be your knas right there.
Right. So therefore, it cannot be, the issue cannot be that which is unique in each of the circumstances. It has to be what is the common factor between the two.
So there's one case we spoke about where it was speaking that we got in trouble, where he said where a base din would give psak, and the person who would whatever.
The Zaki Mamre.
Right.
Remember, we said he had to act on his own action. He didn't have to say, just to speak it, he actually had to do it.
I have to review. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so now v'chazar adin. So therefore v'chazar adin. So we're going to take a look at both these. Lo re'izah k're'izah v'lo re'izah k're'izah. You can't say whatever's unique about Motzi Shemra's causing the lashes, and you can't say whatever's unique about the about Edom Zomim is causing the lashes, because they both get lashes. So what is the thing that is connecting the two things? It's a lav shem bo ma'aseh. It's a prohibition. There's no action. And v'lo kenolav, you get lashes. Must be that that's always the case. Whenever you've got a prohibition, even though there's no action taking place, you're still going to get Makkos. Af kol av shem b'ma'aseh lo kenolav. Yeah, but Malat tzad hashavishim and shen knas. He says, you know what is connected between Edom Zomim and Motzi Shemra, which is different than everything else? Both of those are a knas, remember. So therefore, maybe in order to get lashes for a statement or for speaking, it has to be a case where you're talking about an avera, which is a knas. It doesn't work if it's not a knas. So he says, holo kasha. That's not a problem. Rabbi Yehuda lo savar like Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Yehuda does not hold like Rabbi Akiva, as we said, right? He doesn't hold this now. He's saying Rabbi Yehuda does not hold like Rabbi Akiva. He doesn't hold it's a knas. He says, well, maybe the connection between the two, Motzi Shemra, the case of the Motzi Shem, the slandering the wife, and the case of Edom Zomimim, is that they both have something unique and strict about them. One is that you have 2 punishments by the Motzi Shemra, and Edom Zomimim, that there's no warning. So maybe because there's something special and unique about each of the cases, that is going to be the reason why you get lashes in those specific cases, but not every time you speak without, you have an inaction. So Rabbi Yehuda tzad chamer lo parach. Rabbi Yehuda says, yeah, but the fact that there exists something is not a thing to connect, because it's not the same thing. If you're going to tell me that there's something unique about, right, like my speeding case, well, the fact that this car was red and the fact that this car is a sports car, that's why you get speeding tickets. So therefore, if I happen to have a car which is made in a foreign country, then I'm going to get a speeding ticket, because just like these were cases where something was unique about the car, so therefore also this is a case that is also unique about a car, that's why I'm going to get a speeding ticket. No, it has to be something that is similar between the two things. You can't just pick You say, well, there's something unique about this and something unique about this. So therefore, if there's something unique in a third circumstance, that's going to apply there also. Rabbi Yehuda says that's not how the tzad hashava works. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says that tzad hashava only works if the two things are connected, and the only thing that connects these two averos is that there's no action, and you're going to get lashes anyway. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns. Rabbi Yehuda learns there's no action anyway, and you get lashes. Now, the Rabbanan, hay lo sana bereach et sheker my darshi bei. This pasuk that says that that you're not allowed to bear false witness. So, how do they learn this pasuk? According to Rabbi Yehuda, it means that you're going to get lashes for it. So ahumi boy lazhara le'edim zomim. They need this pasuk. It's the, as we always said, that you need to have two pasuk. Whenever you're going to punish somebody for something in the Torah, you need one pasuk that tells you it's prohibited, and another pasuk that tells you what the punishment is. The punishment by edim zomim we know. It says vasisim kasher zomim. You're going to do to them whatever they scheme to do. Where's the prohibition? So the answer is that's this prohibition. Lo saneh bereach sheker. You're not allowed to bear false witness. That's the prohibition, which then leads to the punishment for edim zomim. You lied, and what's your punishment? Vasisim lo kasher zomim. That's how the Rabbanan are learning these psukim. For Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir says, no, that is a separate prohibition, and you're going to get lashes for lo saneh bereach sheker. So as har edim zomim minole. So where do they see the prohibition? Where's the prohibition of edim zomim? So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Nafkalei mi venish arim yishmeu v'yirau v'lo yosifu od. This is where Rabbi Yirmiyah says that you take your edim zomim and you're going to punish them, whatever they scheme to do, so that everybody else who's left over will hear and they will see and they won't do that again. So it says, right, v'lo yosifu od, they will not do it. That they will not do it is the prohibition of testifying falsely. Do not do that. The Rabbanan, so how do the Rabbanan? They don't need that pasuk. What do they do? What do they do with that? Hahumi baile lahachraza. This is a separate requirement. This is the Torah telling me that when people are liars in court, you've got to advertise. You've got to make sure that everybody understands this is not allowed, so that everybody will see it, everyone will hear, and they won't do it again. That's the requirement there. For Rabbi Meir says, Hachraza may v'yishmu v'yiro nafka. Rabbi Yehuda says, you can divide that pasuk into two parts. One part of the pasuk says, everyone should hear it, everyone should see. And then a separate part of the pasuk which says, and they should not do it. So therefore, they should not do it is the prohibition. They should announce based on v'yishma v'yiro. Okay, so that's up to the next Mishnah. Mishnah says, Mishalshim b'mamon ve'in mishalshim b'Makkos. We split up the money when edim zomim are found to be guilty. We're going to divide the payment, the monetary payment. Okay, Amidov, right? We're going to split this monetary payment amongst let's say they all testify that this guy owes $200. There's two witnesses. This one's going to pay 100. This one's going to pay 100. Ketzad, how does this work? 200 zuz. V'nim tzu zomin, they turn out they're zomin. Mishalshin beinehem, you're going to give this one half of the punishment, this one half the punishment. However, let's say they testify that this person is going to be liable for Malkus penalty, Malkus Rabbayim. It turns out that they're edim zomim, everybody's going to get 40. They get the full 40. You don't say, you get 20 and you get 20. Minani Mili, says the Gemara. Where do I know that from? Rabbi says, Rasha b'chayve Malkus, v'nema Rasha b'chayve Misos. The pasuk says, the word Rasha, this is a Gzera Shava to remember, because this Gzera Shava tells us that the rules that apply to a Beis Din and to most of the court cases that apply to cases of capital punishment apply to corporal punishment as well, right? Malkus cases and Misa cases have the same rules in court. From this Gzera Shava, this is Gzera Shava called, in shorthand, Rasha. It says Rasha b'chayve Malkus, it says Rasha in chayve Misos Beis Din. Mal holon ein Misa lemechza, just like you can't kill somebody halfway, so Avkan in Malkus lemechza. So too, you can't, there's no such thing as a punishment of Malkus that's halfway. Even though theoretically you could, right? You could get 20 and you could get 20. That's halfway. We're not going to do that. We're going to consider it from this Gzera Shava just like a death sentence. You can't give him half the death sentence and him half the death sentence. So too, when we give Malkus, everybody gets the whole thing. So Rava says, he says, I'll tell you why. It says because you have to scheme. You have to do whatever the guy schemed. The guy schemed to give this guy 40 lashes. You can't give him 20 and him 20. That's not what they schemed. So if that's a good answer, so then mamonami. So then why is it that money we can split up? They schemed to give 200. Why are you making him pay 100 and him pay 100? That's also not what they schemed. The answer is mamo mitzaref, malkus lo mitzaref. The answer is because at the end of the day, when you're talking about money, you're going to give the money to the victim. And therefore, you're going to combine the money together, and the victim got the 200 zuz that he was being accused that was false. Okay? So he got what he was being attacked for. The Makkos isn't something that you're paying to the person. Therefore, there's no such thing as combining the Makkos together to form anything. There's no concept of combining it because you're not giving it to anybody. So therefore, each person has to receive their own punishment. Okay? Next Mishnah. Eina Edom Nasan Zomim Ad Sheyazimu Es Atzmon. Edom Zomim are not Edom Zomim until they themselves are found to be false. Not the testimony. It's not what they say that's false. They themselves have to be false. Ketzad. For example, Ketzad Amru Me'idin Anu B'ish Ploni Shehareges HaNefesh. So they say, for example, we're testifying that so-and-so killed somebody. Amru Lem Heichatem Me'idim Sharei Nerag Zeh O HaHoreg Zeh Haya Imanu Oso Hayom B'Makom Ploni. They say, how can you testify that this person killed the other person? Reuven couldn't have killed Shimon. Reuven was with us. Or Shimon was with us. Right? So they were alive. You say killed him on Sunday. You were with the murder victim was all day on Sunday with us. So he wasn't dead. So therefore, you're wrong. Ein elu zomim. That's not Edom zomim, right? Because that's conflicting their testimony. That's hakosha. That's contradiction. If there's contradiction, the murderer gets off. That's true. But there's no zomim. That's not a Edom zomim. Aval, however, however, if they said to the witnesses, how could you testify? You, the witnesses, were with us on Sunday. That's Edom Zomim. Edom Zomim is when the people are testifying that the witnesses were with them, not the murder victim or the murderer. And now they can get killed based on their testimony. Let's say another set of witnesses come and they are going to make this set Edom Zomim. Now another set comes and they make them. So in other words, what happens is like this, right? Reuven, they testify, come in, they say, Reuven killed Shimon. Comes a second witnesses and say, no, you were with us. So another set of witnesses comes in and says, no, we saw Reuven kill Shimon. And the same set of witnesses comes back and goes, no, you were also with us. So another guy comes in and goes, no, we saw Reuven kill Shimon. And the guy says, yeah, you guys were also with us, remember? You were all with us, right? So afilu mea, even if 100 times that happens, Kulam Yargu, you're going to kill all of the witnesses that are Zomimim. You're going to kill based on this one set that keeps saying, no, you were with us, you were with us, you were with us. Seems weird. Rabbi Yehuda agrees. Rabbi Yehuda says, Omar, this seems like a strange, this is like a circus here. This is like a strange circumstance going on here. Veinu nerag elakas rishon bilvan. You can't kill anybody. The only time you believe them on the first set. But if they keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, at some point you have to realize this extra set of witnesses, they're pulling shtick. And you can't keep believing them to kill one person after the next, based on their testimony. Okay, we got to stop here for 9 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question.